Everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As you know, Premier Notley promised a review of Alberta's 301 agencies, boards, and commissions. These are the arm's length agencies which do work on behalf of the Government of Alberta. This review is currently underway and timely. The ABCs, as they're called, collectively direct the spending of about half of Alberta's budget. That's billions of taxpayers' dollars that needs to be considered within our government's overall plan to grow and diversify the economy, stabilize public services, and return the budget to balance. Albertans need to feel confident that these agencies are using public resources efficiently and effectively to provide services Albertans need and want. It's also important that ABCs, as public agencies, are transparent and accountable, and are following good governance practices. That is what this review is looking at. As I said in my budget address, I want to emphasize that many good people have and continue to contribute long hours of excellent public service on these boards, often for very modest compensation. But it is time to look at this sector. The first phase of the review includes 136 public agencies subject to the Alberta Public Agencies Governance Act and is expected to be completed by March 2016. Phase 2 of the review will include 141 agencies that are not governed under the Act, concluding next summer. The third and final review phase, to be completed by the late fall of 2016, will focus on Board of Governors at post-secondary institutions. The review will be looking at the role, mandate, and governance practices of each agency, board, and commission. And of course, Premier Notley has been very clear that the review will also look at board membership. She believes, as we all believe, that senior executives and board members of ABCs should be appointed based on merit. In addition, we're asking an outside consultant to look at compensation levels to ensure they're appropriate. Our aim is to rationalize and standardize the compensation of people appointed to sit on them. Overall, what we are looking to do is ensure that Albertans are well served by government agencies, boards, and commissions. We are focused on meeting Albertans' needs as effectively and efficiently as possible. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Minister Ganley, who's going to provide you some comments on the related legislation she introduced in the House today, and then we'll both be available, as Veronica said, for questions.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm pleased to announce the introduction of Bill 5, the Public Sector Compensation Transparency Act. The bill follows through on our promise to improve transparency in our public sector. This bill focuses on higher income earners and would result in salary disclosure for those earning more than $125,000 a year. It will require compensation disclosure from agencies, boards, and commissions, post-secondary institutions, independent offices of the legislature, health service as well as health service entities and other public sector bodies. It also moves existing disclosure requirements of the Government of Alberta employees into legislation. The compensation paid to individual employees, as well as the compensation paid to physicians and other health practitioners, will be made available to the public. Because municipalities and school boards are made up of elected officials themselves, they will be given the ability to disclose salaries if they so choose. This government is serious about increasing transparency, and this bill will show Albertans how their tax dollars are being spent. We recognize that making this information public affects a wide variety of employers and employees. The salary disclosure threshold of $125,000 for ABCs includes overtime. This will minimize costs and administrative burden for employers who would otherwise have to manually delete overtime hours from the total compensation as reported on the employee's T4. My ministry, with the help of other government ministries, will be consulting the affected parties on how best to implement the Act as we draft regulations. We will begin consultation over the next few months. Upon passage of this bill, the first public disclosure for employees of agencies, boards, and commissions will happen on June 30th, 2016. The legislation allows for physician compensation to be disclosed. Because physicians and other medical professionals are compensated through a variety of funding mechanisms, unique rules will need to be applied. So the details will be worked out in regulations. Dates for the disclosure of compensation paid to these professionals will be determined once consultations have been completed. We will take the time to ensure the regulations are comprehensive and fair and that they accomplish what we're setting out to do. This government has committed to ensuring that Albertans know how public money is spent, and this is another step along that path. Thank you. We can now take your questions.
Yeah, can you give us a ballpark figure of how many people would be affected under this change? See their salaries disclosed?
We have been working with the department to get some more accurate numbers, but of course, these employees work for a number of organizations under a number of ministries. We understand there are over 150,000 employees of public sector bodies, and we estimate that several thousand employees will be disclosed by this new legislation.
This year. Okay.
In the thousands, yes.
Why did you choose the 125,000 rather than lower at 100?
Well, this legislation is aimed to get at essentially high-income earners who are on the public dime. We could have gone the same way as the GOA disclosure is now, with the lower threshold and the exclusion of overtime. But currently, in excess of 200 hours are spent just in the government of Alberta alone to exclude overtime. When we spoke to our partners in Alberta Health Services, they couldn't even estimate how many hours it would take to try and estimate how long it would take to delete those overtime hours from all of their employees. So the decision was taken that instead of putting that administrative burden on those agencies, we would go with the 125, including overtime.
Did you consult with the AMA prior to, this legislation coming in that will mandate that doctors have to reveal what they make?
Well, we will be moving forward in consultation with the AMA. Currently, the legislation enables us to make regulations that will deal with doctor compensation because physician compensation comes from multiple sources and is quite complicated. We're going to need to work with them to work out how we're going to disclose that compensation.
Why give municipalities and school boards the choice? Why not just tell them that this is what they have to do now?
Because municipalities and school boards are themselves elected officials who are accountable to the public. So that accountability will allow them to determine what's best for their local municipality or their local school board in terms of disclosure.
Minister Ceci, you mentioned revisiting how to best appoint people to these boards and commissions based on merit.
Right.
What are your suspicions about the makeup of boards and commissions currently? I guess, how confident are you that that was happening?
We're in the process always of appointing people to these agencies, boards, and commissions. And what we are ensuring we're doing going forward is that merit is the primary getting through the processes of a director specifically doing this has all of that covered. So that's my primary goal, is to make sure each agency, board, and commission has the right complement of people it needs, that the boxes are checked off, and that the skill sets of all appointees complement the needs of that board.
But do you think that was being done under the former government?
I've been here 6 months, and my role is to go forward. The actions we're taking, I think, are always driven by ensuring that agency boards and commissions are effective and efficient. There's half of the budget that is under the controls of agency boards and commissions, and my goal is to ensure that Albertans are getting good value for those monies.
Why not just use the Jim Prentice review of ABCs?
We believe that this is the right thing to do. We're really interested in digging in. All ministers are getting to know their agency boards and commissions, like I am in mine. There's about 21 in the Treasury Board and Finance. And I think, with the 6 months behind us, we're kind of getting a sense of what's necessary and what's not necessary. So 301 over the year are going to be looked at, and that's the responsibility we have to take upon ourselves.
Is it all helpful?
I think that we're designing our own process. It's important for us to get a handle on it. Certainly, previous things were done, and that's good, that helps out. But what we need to do is take responsibility, and we're all doing that.
I'm going to see if there's any questions on the line. Operator, do we have any questions?
There are no questions over the phone.
Okay, any more from the floor?
Minister Gandy, can you just clarify what this means for doctors? So will they for sure have to reveal their fee-for-service at some point in the future, or not? Just explain that to me.
At some point in the future, we will be enacting regulations to capture fee-for-service. The thing is that physicians are compensated, in addition to fee-for-service, they can be paid salaries, either through Alberta Health Services or through universities. Sometimes they get funding through the AMA itself. So we're gonna have to find a way to bring all that information together, and we think that we should do that by going forward in consultation with the AMA and with AHS to determine the best way to do that.
This government's gonna have to deal with the AMA on a whole variety of other issues. Are you at all concerned about, having not asked them if they're comfortable revealing what they're being paid, that there's gonna be some contentiousness about this?
I don't think there will be a lot of contentiousness about this, no. I think that, this government has been very clear about moving to greater transparency and including agencies, boards, and commissions, of which one, AHS is one. So I don't think that this is coming as any particular surprise to anyone. And I think that people will work with us.
We have time for one more, guys?
What about professors and nurses? What have you heard from them about disclosing their salaries?
I think that, public sector workers, they don't want their privacy unfairly invaded, but they also understand that this government has a commitment to transparency, particularly when we're dealing with, we're talking about over 125, so it's sort of a higher salary range people.
Okay, one more, guys?
What kind of support are you expecting from opposition or non-supporters? What are you expecting in the House?
Well, as always, when we're moving forward to sort of increase government transparency, we're extremely hopeful that the entire House will be supportive. I mean, certainly it was the case when we moved forward with Bill 1, which was a clear platform commitment of ours. The entire House supported it, and we're very hopeful that they'll be supportive of this as well.
Would you be open to amendments that would lower the threshold closer to that 100,000 for government workers?
Well, we've taken a considerable amount of time in considering that threshold, and we have decided that, rather than having the government scheme, which involves manual exclusion of overtime, that it's better to pick this higher threshold and not have to go through that administrative burden. And I expect that our colleagues across the floor will be supportive of us not increasing administrative burden unnecessarily.
Did you think about changing?
Last one, guys.
Your plan involves 150 ABCs, but you're reviewing 300. What's the distinction?
No, well, sorry, the review of all ABCs is, there's 301, and I'll just tell you that the first tranche is going to be 136. They're the ones governed by the Alberta Public Agencies Governance Act, and we're dealing with different tranches in terms of whether they are meeting their needs, whether they're addressing their mandates, their governance structure, and their outcomes. So what I'm doing is through the ministers and each of them looking at the agencies and boards and commissions under their responsibility areas is essentially, do we want to keep this agency, board, and commission? Do we want to see amalgamation go on, or do we want to see things brought back into the ministry itself?
It's going to be that it's only 150 because the government doesn't have direct control over the other 150.
So in the case of the Disclosure Act, so where we're talking about disclosing salaries, the case is that, we're dealing with the APEGA boards, which are ones over which the government has direct control. So they're government funded, we appoint the board members, because this bill is intended to trace public money going into those factors. So there are a number of other boards and commissions to which we appoint 1 or 2 members, but sometimes we don't provide them any funding. Sometimes they're privately funded, and it's not really the place of the government, I think, to sort of look into the windows of private.
Those boards, you're just looking at whether we're getting value, or what the government's role is on that particular body, and whether it's working out. The non-150 that if you're looking at 150 with a direct control, the other 150 just has some government members on it and doesn't have direct control, correct?
Right, they're not
So
on
you're-
PEGA,
those
yeah.
ones, you're just looking at how the government's role is in those committees.
That's
and whether
correct.
it's working.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay,
Is
thanks,
your-
guys.
How much is your review expected to cost?
Which part?
How about the first part?
The first phase, we are doing that in-house for a review of ministry and ministry officials. They'll be coming to Treasury Board with recommendations. That is just staff time here. So the other part of it is a compensation review. Did I mention a compensation? I did, didn't I? It is posted on the Alberta Procurement Services website, and that cost is not known yet because bids are being accepted starting today.
Mr. You
Thanks,
talked
guys.
about the cost
Okay.
of the government of Alberta.
Sorry, Brian, we gotta wrap it up.
Okay.
And we have
Thank you.
Wild Rose Shadow